Filming live from the firehouse, it's Good Night with Christopher Blue. With special guest, Germain. I'm your co-host, Reverb. Who is your host, Christopher Blue?
Hello and welcome to Good Night with Christopher Blue. I'm Christopher Blue and we have a wonderful show for you tonight. We're going to explain that joke with Reverb in a moment. First, I'd like to thank you so much for liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Don't forget to ring that bell so you get notified whenever we upload new content. When we come back, Germain.
Hey, you like Good Night with Christopher Blue?
I love Good Night with Christopher Blue.
You wanna see videos you can't see anywhere else?
Yeah?
Go join the Patreon. We got all sorts of good things in there for ya.
I'm gonna do that right now. Good Night with Christopher Blue Patreon. The link is in the description. Welcome back. Tonight's guest is a comic book artist. He started his own comic book company, a couple of comic book titles that we will talk about. Put your hands together for Germain.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Now,
Appreciate it.
But before we get talking about your comic book work, like I said earlier, we have to explain Reverb's joke that he pulled over there.
Yeah.
When we first met, I was wearing a superhero uniform.
Yes.
And Reverb over there went by a different name. Yeah.
Was also a superhero. Yes.
And the mask he wore back then really disrupted his voice. And he spoke like this.
Okay, it's an inside joke. I got you.
That was a funny callback there. But let's focus back on you, Brian. First off, I gotta ask, like, what got you started making your own comics?
Well, okay, so honestly, it started back. I've drawn since I was 2. And by the time I was 3, I was drawing pictures most 8-year-olds couldn't draw. So it was just kind of a natural thing for me to do that. And I always liked superheroes and comics and stuff like that. But when I was about 12, I got I went to my grandmother's house basically, and she had this old briefcase. And she opened up this old briefcase, and there was a copy of Avengers 165, and there was a copy of Spectacular Spider-Man, Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man, and I want to say it was the first issue, but the second or like a reprint,
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool. It was just definitely cool looking at these comics, because I was already into collecting comics at about 10, 12, and then when I got there, I seen these things, and I always knew, drawing, I always wanted to draw. And for a while there, I was doing fantasy art, but I didn't get as far with the fantasy art back then. And so I thought I'd try my hand at comics.
Yeah, nice. So do you do superhero comics, or is it like other fantasy comics that you don't typically think of when you think of comics?
No, I do a lot of superhero stuff. That's kind of my main favorite to do. And I have started doing some fantasy stuff, but mostly high fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons type stuff, like swords and sorcery. But mostly it's still the superhero stuff.
What would you say is your favorite comic that you produce?
That I produced? It's got to be my first one. It's got to be Moonshadow. It's a lot of people's favorites too. I've sold them more copies of that comic and more copies of the first issue than any other comics I've made. Wow. So yeah, and I've had longer time to do it, which is fair. But yeah, I sold when I first opened up the box at Motor City Comic Con to sell them, I literally sold 300 copies in 30 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, I did go all around and tell everybody that I was going to be there next year with my comic, and then I went when I got there the following year. I was like when I got there that year, I was like going around telling everybody about my comic was going to be there and blah, 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 blah. And it's, shipping in tomorrow and it'll show up during the day tomorrow. And so on Saturday, I opened that box and there was people all over. And then I also went around table to table and sold some to different artists or different writers or whatever. And then also like if they were willing to trade, I would swap, like, hey, give me a copy of yours. Cause I love reading comics. So, give me a copy of yours, trade you a copy of mine, like good way to get free comics is to give a free comic,
So when starting your own story and creating your own characters, where do you start? Because like when you're creating that, you're essentially creating an entire universe that you're telling stories in. Where do you start?
Well, I guess for me, one of the things is, like all the superheroes are from like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, like that area, like big cities. And, I'm from Flint. So, like, which is like mini Detroit. It's not even Detroit, but, so I wanted to do a comic based in Michigan, a superhero based in Michigan, and kind of do it with a Flint-esque vibe to it, I don't actually say the name Flint in the thing. I just call it downtown. So, but yeah, it's where I started basically is I had other characters that I had previously made for the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they had a RPG like Dungeons and Dragons, but it was for Marvel Superheroes back in the 80s. Yeah, anyways, so I made a bunch of characters up for that and stuff. But I thought, those characters were pretty near and dear to my heart. So I was like, well, I don't want anybody to steal my characters, So I had to come up with a whole new character. And I'm like, well, what do I do here? And I'm like, well, the ones I like the costumes of, I like the costume of, most people don't know this. They think he's based on Spawn. They think Moonshadow's based on Spawn. And actually, the costume is based on Hawk from DC's Hawk and Dove.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I wanted to do a kind of a bluish version of Hawk, and like what would Hawk look like with Dove's coloring, and the cape, I made it all tattered and stuff, and I think that's where they got the Spawn, like where they got the Spawn thing, and it's got like little things that come down, but where I actually got the tattering idea was a character from Marvel that's called Tatterdemalion. and he's like one of the night shift, one of Shroud's guys. They kind of like they're essentially like Monster Brigade or something like that. Like they're a little weird circus performers, I think.
So you took some inspiration from Marvel and DC to create your own heroes.
Oh yeah. And I said basically, well, everybody seems to like Batman. Batman has always been one of my favorite DC characters, and he seems to be always like a lot of people's favorite DC character. And I can't say that I hadn't read Spawn at that time, because I had, but I actually did come up with Moonshadow before Spawn was created. I came up with him back in 92, I think, 91. No, it was the year before Spawn came out. Anyways, so Spawn actually might have been created, but I didn't know about him until after, But so because I actually sent a big packet of work, and Moonshadow was among that packet, and I sent it to Marvel Comics, and that was when Todd still was working with Marvel Comics. I'm not saying he stole my Moonshadow from Spawn, but some people might think he did. I don't think he really looks that much like Spawn, except for, I don't know. He's kind of a Night Sentry type guy,
Yeah. So talking about like the business end of things, what's it like starting your own comic book company?
Difficult.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. It's very rewarding, but it is very much a challenge. I would not say for your people not to do it. I would actually encourage people to do it. The thing is it's not for everybody. And if you did do it and you aren't super successful at it, that's kind of par for the course. You're not going to necessarily get super successful, especially not overnight. Overnight success is, probably one in, 1,000, maybe, but maybe more than that even, I don't know. But regardless, it was basically, it was inspired by the idea that when I was going around to different people saying, hey, I'd like you to publish my comic, they were saying, well, have you ever been published before? And I would be like, well, no, not really. I've been published in a newspaper. And they're like, no, have you ever been published with comic art before? And I'm like, no, I haven't. And so they would always say, well, we don't publish anybody who's never been published before. And I'm thinking, well, then how do I get published? If everybody says we don't publish. So then I was like, well, what if I said, well, I could self-publish. And then I thought, well, I could kind of self-publish. Yeah. And I could try that, But then I thought, there's got to be more people with my problem. There's got to be a lot more people go out there that go, how do I get published? How do I get published if I can't get published by anybody? So I started the company in mind with, I was going to publish people other than just myself. And so I started a publishing company, with the comic book company, and I had a publishing company attached, like that. But I started that basically, with the idea that other people might want to do the same thing and collaborate and try to get in on doing that same sort of gig.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Brian, would you be willing to collaborate with me and my real life superhero team and do a one-off issue of a comic book about our team, and maybe we can raise some money for charity?
Yeah, absolutely. What's the name of the superhero team, by the way?
We are the XJL Heartland.
XJL Heartland, huh? Okay. But yeah, that's the XJL is, I remember that from something.
Extreme Justice League.
Extreme Justice League, yes. I remember that. Okay, yes. Yep, XJL Heartland. Okay, cool.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I would definitely be willing to do that. Do you know what charity it would be for? Would you say with charity?
Not yet, but hopefully by the time we get this episode out, we'll have it on screen. We'll figure that out.
Awesome. I did one for it was protect.org. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I'm not.
And it's anti-child abuse group. And I did my own benefits book for the Boston Marathon bombing for the first responders for that thing. So
that's awesome.
So yeah, the families and people for it was called the Boston One Fund. So yeah.
That's awesome.
And I've done lots of charity stuff because I like to do that. I used to work for muscular dystrophy. So, Muscular Dystrophy Association. I did haunted houses for years and stuff. So.
Well, Brian, where can people go to maybe pick up some of your comics or just keep up with what you're doing?
So most of the time I'm on Facebook, these days. And they can check it out on Facebook, facebook.com/Dark Elf Designs. I'm actually working on another Dark Elf Designs website, but it's been a while. I've actually been doing a lot these days. I've been doing DMing and doing a live stream with my DMing and doing art through there, like maps and whatever for Dungeons and Dragons. And so I'm playing on a Twitch stream called Action Surge.
Okay.
So, and I do think that maybe I will do some fantasy comics based on those characters in those streams, hopefully, at one point.
That's awesome. Brian, thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a joy being able to talk to you and catch up a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Nice seeing you again.
Yes, you as well.
Well, that's our show. Thank you guys so much for liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Don't forget to ring that bell so you get notified whenever we upload new content. Until next time, good night, my sweet baby angels. I'll see you in the future.